Listen, this video could easily be an hour long, mainly because many of the things I hate about new vehicles in general also apply to trucks. A lack of interesting options, overcomplicated and often unnecessary electronics, and just their complete lack of soul and character. I can't promise I won't mention these things along the way, but I do really want to focus in on trucks and what makes a good truck. Throughout this video, we're going to be looking at various classic vehicles that I'm sure many of you would love to own, not only because they're amazing, but also because they can be good investments. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs talk about how classic cars and fine art can be incredible assets that can even appreciate better than traditional investments. And they're not necessarily affected by inflation the same way. And if you're like me, you probably wish you could get in on these kinds of investments, but you just don't have millions to, say, buy a Picasso painting or a Ferrari 250 GT. But if you are interested in how you could diversify your portfolio by investing in the fine arts, I've got a solution because this video is sponsored by Masterworks. Masterworks is an art investing platform that has turned this previously inaccessible asset class into a legitimate option for investors. And the nice thing is you don't have to be an art expert. Masterworks securitizes the paintings to break them into shares, and their advisors can help you choose which paintings to invest in that match with your financial goals. This means that you don't have to spend millions on, say, one painting, and you can easily control the amount you invest. Masterworks distributed back a total of $60 million plus in investor proceeds to date, with their 23rd exit just happening recently. Over 900,000 members have signed on, with shares of paintings like Picasso and Banksy's previously selling out in minutes, but by using my special QR code on screen now, or the link in the description, you can skip Masterworks' waitlist and invest right away. Past results are not indicative of future performance and do not include unsold works. Investing involves risk. Check out the QR code or link in the description, and big thanks to Masterworks again for sponsoring the video. Alright, let's jump in. In many ways, the story of the pickup truck as we know it began in 1925 when Ford introduced the Model T runabout. Often considered the first factory-produced pickup, this vehicle featured a steel bed and an adjustable tailgate, offering a practical solution for farmers and small business owners. Throughout the 1930s, manufacturers like Ford and Chevy and Dodge continued to innovate, producing models like the Ford Model A and Model B pickups. These early trucks focused on practicality and utility, and they really did pave the way for trucks going forward. Like the rest of the industry, the post-war era marked a period of significant growth and development for pickup trucks. In 1947, Chevrolet launched the Advanced Design series, which featured a new, more robust cab design. This series remained in production until 1955, setting a standard for durability and reliability. Meanwhile, in 1954, Ford introduced the F-Series, a line that would become one of the most popular and long-standing in the industry. Early F-Series models boasted improved engines and better suspension systems, catering to a growing demand for more powerful and comfortable, but also capable vehicles. The 1960s and 1970s saw the modernization of the pickup truck, with manufacturers introducing significant design and engineering advancements. In 1960, Chevrolet's CK series debuted with independent front suspension, which really enhanced the ride quality and handling. Ford's F-Series continued to evolve with the 1965 model, a truck that my dad owns, featuring a modern design and the innovative twin I-beam front suspension. In 1972, Dodge entered the fray with the D-Series, which offered more comfortable interiors and increased power, appealing to a broader audience beyond just work vehicle users. And the 1980s and 90s really brought a shift towards increased comfort and versatility in pickup trucks. Ford introduced the F-150, quickly becoming a bestseller and cementing its status as really an American icon. Through the 70s and 80s, small affordable trucks became incredibly popular as well, and we just saw a lot of diversity in trucks at this time. If you wanted a truck that could rival supercars from 0 to 60, you could have it. Or if you had no money, you could get a small American or Japanese truck. If you, for some reason, needed serious power and towing capability, there were models like the F-350 Super Duty or GM 3500 or Ram 2500 or 3500. powered by the iconic Cummins engine. Now, all of this led into the era that I like to call the Roaring 2000s, because at this time in the early 2000s, trucks and arguably cars in general, and maybe even society, well, they peaked. Okay, that was probably the 90s, but, whatever. This is because despite significant improvements in terms of tech and safety, trucks remained trucks, true to their heritage. They hadn't really changed that much, and their purpose was basically the same, truckly duties. In terms of just truck usefulness, most of the model lines peaked at this point, but a storm was brewing as the 2000s carried on. Multiple things were coming together at once, a sort of perfect storm meant to ruin trucks as we know them. Now, I've talked at length about how various EPA regulations have really changed the landscape of American automotive manufacturing. Simply put, they've made it almost impossible to have a diverse lineup of different types of cars and trucks. The standards for smaller vehicles is pretty much unattainable. This is in part the reason why vehicles have gotten so massive. But the reality is, this is what the manufacturers want. It's actually much simpler for companies to sell way less volume just because of the difficulties of production and supply chain, but to sell the vehicles they have for way more. I mean, from the time we're talking about, 2010, the new and used car market has way outpaced inflation. So you can't just chalk it up to inflation. But if you're going to charge $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a truck, what does that truck need to look like? Well, this is where the manufacturer's approach of selling less vehicles but at a premium really dovetails with our tastes as consumers. Yes, we are in some ways to blame for this mess. There was already by the 2000s a trend for truck and SUV manufacturers towards more comfort and really more luxury. But all of that really sped up when companies like Ford and Chevy began to focus almost entirely on making their trucks luxury trucks. Not that long ago, my dad owned a 2006 Chevy Silverado, regular cab, manual, that's right, manual, with just a radio. It didn't even have a CD player. I don't even think it had air conditioning. MSRP brand new for $18,000, which would be about $28,000 today, adjusted for inflation. For a Silverado, mind you. Now, Chevy still makes a regular cab work truck with a long bed, which is awesome, but it's going to run you about $40,000. Why? Well, because it has lane assist and Apple CarPlay and keyless entry. They just don't make true work trucks or bare-bone trucks anymore. And if you think, the Tacoma or the Colorado, that'll get you more bang for your buck, you're wrong. I just recently was talking with a wildlife removal guy. He actually removed some raccoons from our attic, which is a whole nother story. And his work truck was a relatively new Tacoma, and he was saying that he just didn't really like it and that it didn't really work for what he does compared to his older truck. And, there's some pretty obvious reasons for that. So let's talk about the single most important defining feature of the truck, the thing that's made trucks trucks since the very beginning, the bed. Starting really in the 1960s, full-size trucks came with beds of somewhere around 6 to 8 feet, depending on what option you got. At various points in history, there have been 9-foot beds, but that 72 to about 95 inches or so has been relatively standard, and it still is for something like an F-150, thankfully. But truck owners do complain about bed height for these new full-size trucks. Like if you need to grab something out of the back, it's always been relatively accessible, unless you're quite short. But today, you need to be like 6'5" to easily get anything out of the back of a new standard truck. In terms of price and overall form, full-size trucks for the longest time, whether you were talking the 60s or 80s or early 2000s, they were more comparable to what we consider mid-size trucks today. I'm sure you've noticed this if you've ever seen a modern Tacoma parked next to an older one. They've grown like crazy, but not for the better. The increase in size hasn't made these trucks better at being trucks. And it's in this mid-size class where trucks are just not great. Even a little runaround S10 from, say, the early 2000s came with a 73-inch bed, but up to 88 inches if you wanted it. Today, something like a Colorado, which is a much larger truck, but one of the smallest trucks you can get here in the US, the only bed option is 61.7 inches. And the absolute longest bed you can get for, say, a Tacoma, if you want to haul some wood or haul a couch, is 73 inches. An early 2000s Ford Ranger or S10 or Dakota or Tacoma for that matter really puts a modern Tacoma to shame when it comes to general truck usefulness. And that's why you see these trucks everywhere, because when people actually want to do truck stuff, after a bit of research, they realized that those are much better options. Sure, they make a bit less power and torque, but not as much less as you'd think. Yes, you weren't going to haul a massive trailer with one of those trucks, but you're not going to with a modern Tacoma either. The towing capacity of, say, an '02 Tacoma, I believe, is 5,000 pounds max, and it's 6,500 for a 2024 Tacoma. A Ford Ranger was close to 6,000 pounds at that time, but at least those little trucks could do 95% of the things you needed with a truck because the bed was big enough, whether it was hauling wood or a couch or a dirt bike. But today, because everything has to be a crew cab and the increase in size hasn't actually made the beds bigger, it's just made the cabs bigger, you can't find a little truck today here in the US with any capability. The new Ford Ranger has a measly 5-foot bed, and the Maverick has a 4-foot bed. These are basically not trucks. They're cars in truck clothing. Kind of like how the Bronco Sport is a Bronco, If you want any sort of capability from your truck, let's say an 8-foot bed, you're going to have to shill out a lot more cash. And because a Silverado or a Tundra or an F-150 is so much bigger everywhere else, you now have this monstrous vehicle, whereas in the past you could get an 8-foot bed truck that could still fit on the road and was still manageable. Vehicles in general have changed over the past 60 years in the same way that watches have changed. They've gotten too damn big. And this is especially true for trucks. It's not that the wheelbase is really any different on, say, an F-150. Everything else is just bulkier and taller. It used to be that you'd have to do some serious customization and fabrication to get yourself a massive truck. Today, you can get them right from the factory. Pretty much all of them are massive. A 2005 Tundra is much smaller than a 2024 Tacoma. But this increase in size, as we've shown, hasn't really made trucks any better at being trucks. What it's done is it's made them passenger vehicles. It's made them family vehicles, or vehicles that you by yourself can drive in and feel tough, I guess. It's not that truck manufacturers can't make smaller trucks. Many of them do, but thanks to the EPA, they can't sell them here in the States. Toyota even makes a $10,000 little, basically, K-truck. Many truck enthusiasts wouldn't buy that, that's true, but people like this commenter here who just wants a runabout for his farm, they would buy it instead of having to go spend upwards of $40,000 on a freaking Gator. What's interesting though is that as trucks have become more targeted towards people who want them for their style and not their utility, they've actually become less stylish. They've become uglier. With their ever-growing grills and bulky, aggressive styling, trucks today feel like an attempt at compensating for something. Compare a modern F-150 or Silverado or Tundra with the classic trucks of old. For me, an early 90s F-150 is like the epitome of truck design. Understated, utilitarian, simple, a picture of function leading to form. There's nothing over the top or unnecessary. It's not trying to be something it isn't, But it's beautiful because of how simple it is, because it's meant for a purpose, which is hauling and pulling stuff, not impressing people. It's pretty simple. Trucks weren't built and designed to impress the neighbors the way that they are, but if you actually want to impress the neighbors, go get an early 90s F-150. On top of all this, trucks have lost their simplicity like the rest of the car industry. They're overcomplicated, unservable, overpriced luxury vehicles. I don't necessarily mind there being luxury trucks. That's what was so great about the 90s and the early 2000s. We had every kind of truck you could ever want, including luxury trucks and convertible trucks. But today, every truck has to be fully loaded. The problem with carifying trucks and making them as appealing to families and just regular people is that they're not safe. Despite the fact that the general public is sold on them being safer than normal cars because of their size, this notion that trucks and large SUVs are inherently safer due to their size and mass is just not accurate. Trucks and larger SUVs are classified as light trucks, and light trucks are not subject to the same level of safety standards as, say, a small SUV or sedan. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration conduct crash tests on various vehicles vehicles. But the methods for testing large trucks and SUVs differs from that of smaller vehicles. And this discrepancy can result in less rigorous safety standards for larger vehicles. A study by the IIHS highlighted that many large SUVs and trucks perform poorly in crash tests compared to smaller SUVs and sedans. For instance, in front overlap crash tests, some large SUVs failed to adequately protect occupants due to their high center of gravity and increased risk of rollover. Large trucks are much more prone to rollover than passenger cars, which is almost always the most deadly kind of crash. And if you do have a rollover, studies have shown that as a passenger, you're more likely to be seriously injured or die in a truck or a large SUV than if you're in a smaller passenger car. And then on top of that, large trucks pose significant risks to pedestrians. Their higher front ends and greater mass can cause more severe injuries in collisions. Research recently published shows that SUVs are 2 to 3 times more likely to kill pedestrians in an impact than smaller cars. For trucks and SUVs, the result of impact with a pedestrian is basically it's higher on the person. You've got that ever-growing grille, and this increases the likelihood of critical injuries to the upper head and body. So it might make you cringe at the idea of a low-sitting car taking out your legs, but trust me, it's better than taking an F-150 straight to the face. Trucks and large SUVs have larger blind spots compared to smaller vehicles. Extra cameras and safety features haven't made up for this reality. It's really important to be able to see, and you can't see anything in these vehicles. The size and height of them can also obscure the driver's view of the road, increasing the risk of accidents. If you've ever driven a modern large truck, which I hadn't until relatively recently, holy cow, you can't see anything, especially in front of you. Light trucks having an exception from the regular safety standards does make sense. It's always made sense. But when these vehicles are targeted directly to families and people just commuting and not using them for truck purposes, that's when it gets a bit sketchy. I cringe when I hear people say that they're getting their new teenage driver, a large SUV or truck because they want them to be safe. Meanwhile, everyone is at more risk because of this. If you need the capability of a truck, every now and then, you can literally rent a truck on Turo or just rent an F-250 or cargo van from Home Depot for like $100. Or if it's a quick job, say you just need to haul something home from Home Depot, it's $20. Instead, we pour our life savings into a silly vehicle that we almost never use as it was intended. If you see a truck doing legit truck stuff like hauling a load of gravel, it's almost always an older, smaller truck. That's because we got to keep our new trucks all shiny. Half the people who own these massive, supposedly capable trucks pay other people to haul their stuff. Now, the last thing I want to bemoan, and it really just shows where this part of the industry is the electrification of trucks. This makes so little sense. And you can see it in the way that these trucks are advertised because they focus more on, how fast the thing goes from 0 to 60. The whole point of electric cars was supposed to be less carbon footprint, right? Small electric cars do make some sense. They're simple to manufacture. They weigh less, and therefore they call for small batteries. They're great for, city driving and commuting. Obviously, there's some range anxiety, but if electric cars are the future, then that would be it, right? Then what in the world is going on with these 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pound electric trucks? An electric Hummer, the Cybertruck, an electric F-150, what is the point? We know these trucks aren't better for the environment. They're worse for the environment. We know that they're less capable, they're heavier, they're more expensive. Other than this one guy on YouTube who actually uses his Rivian R1T as a truck, I see Cybertrucks and Rivians everywhere here in Knoxville. They're used to go to Target, not hauling stuff. When I take my van full of crap to the dump, I don't see these trucks. For the most part, I see older trucks. So I just don't get it, We need to stop buying large trucks unless we really have a use for them. Costco is a nightmare already. Even if we all drove like Ford Fiestas, it would still be a nightmare. But because everyone insists on driving these hulking full-size trucks or SUVs, it's that much worse. In the end, I really do think that we as consumers are to blame. We've fallen for this notion that we need these vehicles to commute or to work or to go get groceries. We think they're safer. or they're not. We think they're cool, and they're not. They're supposed to be tools, but they've become status symbols, and so I do think we're to blame for trucks becoming worse. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this thoroughly negative, grumpy video. Be sure to subscribe for more like it.